NASCAR now sharing that legend Kyle Busch has died. And just a couple minutes ago, we told you that he was going to miss this upcoming race because he was in the hospital. We are now hearing from NASCAR that his death, which was announced by the family, by NASCAR as well.
There are moments in sport that stop the world completely. Not because of a trophy or a championship, but because the person at the center of it is simply gone, without warning, without goodbye, without anything that feels remotely fair. On the morning of Thursday, May 21, 2026, NASCAR woke up to one of those moments. Kyle Busch, a man who had spent more than 2 decades pushing race cars to their absolute limits, who had crossed a finish line more times than any other driver in NASCAR history across all 3 of its national series, and who had built a family and a fortune that most people can only dream about, was dead at 41 years old. And somehow, the $80 million he left behind only makes the grief heavier. Because when Samantha opened those financial documents, when Braxton heard what his father had been planning for him, and when little Lennox grew old enough one day to understand the full story of what her father had built, none of that money erased a single thing. None of it replaced the man who was supposed to be there. And that is exactly why this story deserves to be told the right way. Kyle Thomas Busch was born on May 2, 1985, in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you know anything about NASCAR, you know what came next, but the full picture is more impressive than the highlights suggest. He made his NASCAR debut at just 16 years old. By the time he was 19, he was already drawing attention from Hendrick Motorsports, one of the most powerful organizations in the sport. By 20, he was a full-time Cup Series driver. And by 21, he had already won 7 Cup races, which was enough to make veteran drivers uncomfortable. He moved to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2008, and that is where the legend truly took shape. Over 15 seasons with that organization, wearing the number 18 Toyota, sponsored most famously by M&M's, turning his car into one of the most recognizable machines in American motorsports, Kyle Busch became something the sport had never quite seen before. He was aggressive. He was relentless. He was polarizing in a way that seemed almost calculated, and yet when you watched him race, you understood that every bit of that confidence was backed by extraordinary talent. He won the Cup Series championship in 2015, and again in 2019. He won the Xfinity Series championship in 2009. He racked up victories in the Truck Series at a pace that seemed almost unfair. By the time the final checkered flag waved over his career, at Dover Motor Speedway on May 15, 2026, in a Truck Series race, he had accumulated 234 wins across NASCAR's 3 national series. That is more than any driver in the history of the sport. No one has ever won more races. No one is close. That final win at Dover deserves its own moment of reflection, because nobody knew it was the last one. Kyle had been fighting a sinus illness heading into that stretch of racing. At a Cup race at Watkins Glen just days earlier, he had come over the radio asking for a doctor, saying he needed a shot to manage the sinus pressure and elevation discomfort he was dealing with at high speed. He still finished 8th. That stubbornness, that refusal to stop, was as Kyle Busch as anything that ever happened on a racetrack. 5 days later, on May 15, he drove for Spire Motorsports in the Truck Series at Dover. He was sick. By his own admission in an interview the following morning with journalist Jeff Gluck, the cough had been substantial for the better part of 2 weeks. But he went out there anyway, wrestled that truck around the track, and drove to victory lane for the 234th and final time. Standing there, sweat still on his face, he picked up a microphone and said something that few people realized would become prophetic. He told the crowd and the media that you have to take every win you can get, because you never truly know when the last one is coming. He told them to cherish every single one. He said, "Trust me." Nobody understood those words in that moment the way the world understands them now. 2 days later, on May 17, Kyle climbed back into his Cup car for the All-Star race at Dover. He finished 17th. That was the last lap he ever drove in NASCAR's top series. The following Monday, May 18, he sat at home and posted a birthday tribute for his son Braxton, who was turning 11 that very day. He shared a family photo. He wrote about how proud he was. Samantha posted her own tribute that same afternoon, calling Kyle the most incredible husband and father their family could have asked for. 48 hours later, everything changed. On Wednesday evening, May 20th, Kyle walked into the General Motors Charlotte Technical Center in Concord, North Carolina, to test a driving simulator. It was something he had done hundreds of times before. Around 5:30 in the afternoon, something went terribly wrong inside his lungs. Staff members found him on the bathroom floor, struggling to breathe, with blood on his lips. A 911 call was placed within minutes. According to audio obtained by news outlets, the caller's voice was shaking as he described a man who was conscious but in serious distress, short of breath, feeling dangerously overheated, coughing up blood. The caller even asked that the ambulance come in without its sirens, hoping to avoid drawing a crowd outside the facility. Kyle was rushed to a hospital in the Charlotte area. Doctors quickly identified what they were fighting: severe pneumonia, already present in both lungs, that had begun spreading into his bloodstream. That cascade of events triggered a condition called sepsis, a catastrophic response where the immune system, in its desperation to fight the infection, begins attacking the body's own organs. Once sepsis takes hold, every minute is a battle. The medical team worked through the entire night. By Thursday morning, May 21, 2026, Kyle Busch was gone. He was 41 years old. 2 days later, on May 23, the Busch family released a formal statement through a Kyle Busch Company's executive. It confirmed what the medical evaluation had found: severe pneumonia had progressed into sepsis, resulting in rapid and overwhelming complications. The family asked for privacy. The racing world responded with something closer to silence, the kind that only comes when a loss is genuinely too large to process out loud. Now let's talk about what Kyle Busch actually built over the course of his life, because this part of the story is where the fortune and the grief become impossible to separate. At the time of his passing, Kyle's estimated net worth stood at around $80 million. His annual salary at Richard Childress Racing had been $16.9 million, making him the highest-paid driver in all of NASCAR. But salary alone doesn't tell the full story of how this man thought about money and legacy. He owned a stunning Lake Norman mansion in North Carolina, a 15,000-square-foot property with lake views, a private pool, and the kind of surroundings that matched the lifestyle of one of the most successful athletes in American motorsports. He had purchased that home back in 2012 for $7.5 million. He later listed it for close to $13 million. He also owned a sprawling 35-acre estate in Cleveland, North Carolina, complete with a custom barn-dominium, underground garages, and his own private off-road track built right into the property. He listed that one for $4.5 million in 2025. He had invested in Chevrolet dealerships, partnering with the Boyd Automotive Group on a dealership in North Carolina and also investing in Hawthorne Chevrolet in New Jersey. His personal car collection included rare machines that most enthusiasts only ever see in photographs, among them a Lexus LFA worth somewhere in the region of $2 million, one of the most coveted driver's cars ever built. On the business ownership side, Kyle founded Kyle Busch Motorsports in 2010 while still racing full-time. That team became the most successful truck series organization in NASCAR history, winning well over 100 races and serving as a launching pad for drivers who went on to become Cup Series stars. Eric Jones, Christopher Bell, William Byron, and Bubba Wallace all came through that program. When Kyle moved from Joe Gibbs Racing to Richard Childress Racing in 2023 and the team lost its Toyota Alliance, performance declined. By late 2023, he sold the operation to Spire Motorsports in a transaction that included his manufacturing arm, known as Rowdy Manufacturing, along with a 77,000-square-foot facility in Mooresville. Court records placed the total deal at around $14.5 million. He had also launched an energy drink brand called Rowdy Energy in 2020, growing it to a presence in 50,000 stores nationwide and raising $13 million in backing. The business ultimately shut down in early 2024. But even then, Kyle pivoted quickly. He later secured a partnership with Form Energy and continued building his personal brand portfolio right up until the day he died. By any measure, the financial picture Kyle Busch left behind ensures that his family will never face hardship. His wife and children are taken care of in ways that most families cannot imagine. But Samantha, Brexton, and Lennox are not grieving over balance sheets. They are grieving over the promises that were never finished, the races that will never be coached, the birthdays that will come without a father at the table. To understand what this loss means to Samantha Busch, you have to go back to the beginning of their story, because it was never simple, and it was never easy. Samantha, a psychology student at Purdue University in Indiana, first crossed paths with Kyle at a Chevrolet promotional event in 2007. She was working as a model that day. Kyle was 22 years old, fresh off a spectacular rookie campaign in NASCAR, and by Samantha's own account, the first thing she noticed was that he had been given a better assignment that day than she had. She climbed into a car beside him, made a small joke, and what followed was a friendship and romance that grew steadily over the next several years. They were married on December 31, 2010, at Holy Name Cathedral in Chicago, the last day of a year that had seen Kyle racing at the very top of his sport. What the public did not know for years was that behind the success and the trophy cases, this couple was quietly fighting one of the most painful battles a family can face. Samantha went through 6 rounds of in vitro fertilization. She experienced miscarriages. She experienced failed cycles and the kind of heartbreak that doesn't show up in any highlight reel. In interviews over the years, she described the toll it took on her body, on her heart, and at times on the marriage itself. She admitted that the word divorce had begun to feel real during some of those lowest moments. Kyle, she always said, was her anchor through all of it. Brexton Busch arrived in May of 2015, the same year his father won his first Cup Series championship. That year, one son born, one title earned, became the axis on which the Busch family story turned. Inspired by what they had been through, Samantha and Kyle founded the Samantha and Kyle Busch Bundle of Joy Fund, a nonprofit dedicated to helping couples who cannot afford the cost of fertility treatments. Over the course of the following decade, the fund awarded more than 150 grants valued at over $2 million, helping bring more than 100 babies into the world. Firefighters, teachers, military families, police officers, couples who had chosen to serve their communities and then found themselves unable to afford the chance to build a family of their own. Samantha made sure they didn't have to face that alone. Years after Brexton's birth, the couple wanted to give him a sibling. After another painful miscarriage and a failed embryo transfer, they chose to work with a surrogate. Their daughter Lennox arrived in May of 2022. Samantha announced the news through tears and described her new daughter as her tiny peanut. The family that had taken more than a decade to fully arrive was finally complete. Think about how much Samantha fought just to build that family. Think about how many nights she spent in hospitals and waiting rooms and quiet moments of devastation that the world never saw. And then think about what it means that on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon in May, the man who had been beside her through every single one of those moments was taken away on a bathroom floor 3 states away, with no warning at all. Then there is the story of Brexton Busch, and it is one that the entire racing community is now watching with a mixture of heartbreak and genuine wonder. Brexton Busch was born on May 18, 2015, which means he turned 11 just 3 days before his father died. By the time he was 5 years old, Kyle had already placed him in a race car at Millbridge Speedway in North Carolina. Within months, the little boy was winning. By 2024, he had amassed 48 victories in junior racing across a single season, which tells you everything about the genetic and environmental combination happening inside that household. His career total wins climbed past 150. He won the INEX Bandolero Bandits National Championship and captured the junior sprint title at the prestigious Tulsa Shootout, earning the Golden Driller Trophy, one of the most celebrated prizes in youth motorsports in America. Kyle had a specific roadmap laid out for his son. He wanted Brexton racing late models by the age of 12 and super late models by 14. He believed the boy had the potential to compete and win across multiple racing surfaces, similar to the multi-discipline dominance that Kyle Larson has demonstrated in recent years. One day after Kyle's death, Richard Childress Racing made a decision that said more than any press release could. the organization announced that it would suspend use of the number 8 car indefinitely. The team would run the number 33 in its place, driven initially by Austin Hill. And the reason the number 8 was being set aside? The statement was direct and emotional. The number 8 is reserved and ready for Kyle Busch, whenever he is ready to go NASCAR racing. It is a gesture that carries obvious weight, similar in some ways to how RCR handled the number 3 after Dale Earnhardt's death in 2001, holding it largely off the track before Austin Dillon eventually reclaimed it. But with Brexton, it feels different. Because Brexton is already racing. Brexton is already winning. And the number 8 was a car that Kyle himself helped design. It is not just a number. It is a piece of his father that is being held in trust for him until the day he is old enough to carry it forward. Less than 2 weeks after losing his father, Brexton returned to the track at Charlotte Motor Speedway, driving a legend car during a practice session. The racing world responded the way the racing world does, with respect, with emotion, and with the quiet understanding that this young boy carries something enormous on his shoulders now. During the pre-race tribute at the Coca-Cola 600, a small, quietly moving moment was captured on camera. Owen Larson, the son of Kyle Larson, walked across the infield to find Brexton and wrapped him in a hug. Two boys connected by racing and by fathers who were close friends and competitors at the same time. No words needed. The Coca-Cola 600 itself became something none of the 39 drivers who started it had prepared for. Every car carried a small black number 8 decal on the hood. Pole sitter Tyler Reddick led the field around the parade lap with the front row position deliberately left empty, the missing man formation, borrowed from military aviation, where an empty space in a formation honors someone who will not be returning. On lap 8, the entire grandstand held up 8 fingers and fell completely silent. NASCAR CEO Steve O'Donnell stood in the infield alongside Samantha, Brexton, Lennox, and other members of the Busch family and made a simple, direct promise to the children: their father loved them with all of his heart. Kurt Busch, Kyle's brother and a Cup champion himself, walked alone to a painted number 8 on the infield grass. He laid 8 white roses down. He knelt. He made the sign of the cross. It was the kind of moment that cameras capture but words struggle to describe. Daniel Suarez, who got his own NASCAR start through Kyle Busch Motorsports, won that race in the rain. Standing in victory lane, he performed Kyle's signature champion's bow. He dedicated the entire trophy to the family. Up in Indianapolis earlier that same day, the Indy 500 had held its own tribute on lap 17, lighting up the scoring pylon with Kyle's name and the years of his life. On lap 18, the entire facility went silent. The number 18, the number Kyle had worn for 15 seasons at Joe Gibbs Racing, the number tied to 55 of his Cup victories and both of his championships, became a moment of stillness in one of the loudest sporting venues in the world. Kyle Busch never won his third NASCAR championship. He never completed his comeback at Richard Childress Racing, where he had won in his very first season with the team in 2023 but had been chasing the next victory and the next title in the seasons that followed. He never drove in the Indianapolis 500, a race he had openly dreamed about, blocked once by his former team ownership situation in 2018, and then later close to a deal with McLaren that ultimately fell apart at the last moment. That dream went unfulfilled. But here is what he did complete: he left behind a record that will stand in the history books for as long as NASCAR exists. He built a business from the ground up, sold it, and built another. He invested in communities and in families through the Bundle of Joy Fund. He raised